Mrs. Nguyen, your husband has another wife in Houston and 3 kids. We need you to come with us. Those were the words. 18 words. That's all it took to turn my entire life into ash. I'm Linh Nguyen, immigration attorney, born in Saigon, raised in the Sunset District of San Francisco. And for 10 years, I thought I was married to the love of my life. Turns out, I was married to a spreadsheet. You want to know the real kicker? I'm the one who saved him from deportation. I'm the one who filed his green card paperwork. I'm the one who stood in front of a judge and swore that our marriage was real. And he stood right next to me, holding my hand, looking into my eyes, and lying through his teeth. I showed up at my door at 6:47 a.m. I remember because I was making his coffee, the way he liked it. 2 sugars, oat milk, exactly 185 degrees. 10 years of mornings, and I didn't even know he had a second address in Texas. A second wife, a second life. So here's my question to you, sitting there watching this. If you spent a decade building a life with someone, your home, your career, your identity wrapped around them, and you found out it was all a transaction, am I in the wrong for what I did next? Because what did I do next? It wasn't pretty. It wasn't forgiving. And some of you are going to call me cold. But before you judge me, before you hit that comment section, I need you to hear the whole story. Subscribe, turn on notifications, because this is the story of how a green card marriage destroyed a real heart, and how that heart learned to fight back. My name is Lynn, and this is my dual citizenship nightmare. Let me take you back, not to the morning ice knocked, further, to the beginning. Because if you don't understand how deep I fell, you won't understand how hard I crashed. I met David in 2014. I was 32, 3 years out of law school, working 60-hour weeks at a nonprofit immigration clinic in the Mission. He came in as a walk-in. No appointment, no referral, just a guy in a wrinkled button-down, panic in his eyes, telling me ICE had picked up his brother and he was next. His visa had expired. He was undocumented. And he was terrified. I remember the exact moment I fell for him. It wasn't his looks, though. Yeah, he had that whole troubled artist thing going on. Dark hair, these eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. It was when he looked at me and said, "You're the first person who hasn't treated me like a criminal." I should have heard the alarm bells right there. I was his attorney. I wasn't supposed to be the first person who was nice to him. But I was exhausted. I was lonely. And here's the thing, nobody tells you about being a child of immigrants who grows up to help immigrants. You carry this weight, this belief that if you just love someone enough, if you just fix their paperwork, if you just make their life legal, then they'll love you back, that your worth is tied to how useful you are. We started dating 6 months after I won his case. I know, ethical gray area. But I recused myself from his file. I handed him off to a colleague. I told myself I was being professional. What I was really doing, I was already rewriting the rules for him. The proposal came a year later, at Crissy Field, right by the water. He got down on one knee with a ring he'd bought from a pawn shop. I found that out later, and he said, "Lynn, you saved my life. Let me spend the rest of it proving I'm worth saving." I cried. Of course I cried. I was 33. My mother was asking when I'd give her grandchildren, and here was this man who needed me, who wanted me, or so I thought. The first 3 years were good, or at least I thought they were good. David worked odd jobs, construction, delivery, sometimes Uber. He said he was finding himself. I paid the mortgage on our little place in the Richmond district. I covered the bills. I didn't mind. I was making $180,000 a year at a private firm by then. He was my husband, what's mine is yours, right? But looking back, God, the signs were everywhere. I just didn't want to see them. He never added me to his bank account. It's just easier this way, babe. You handle the big stuff, I handle my cash. He took business trips to Austin every 3 months, old friends from back home. You wouldn't like them. He kept his phone face down on the table. He changed his passcode twice a year. He never posted photos of us. I'm private, Lynn. You know that. And I made excuses. Every single time. He's traumatized from his immigration case. He's an introvert. He's just not good with technology. I was a lawyer. I built cases for a living. I cross-examined witnesses, and I couldn't cross-examine my own husband because I was terrified of what I'd find. Year 4, I got pregnant, miscarried at 11 weeks. David was out of town on a job. He came back 3 days later with flowers from a gas station and said, "We'll try again." We never did. I was too heartbroken. He was too busy. Year 5, my mother died. Breast cancer. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. David went to the service. He held my hand. He looked appropriately sad. But that night, while I was sobbing in our bed, he was in the bathroom texting someone. I could see the blue light under the door. I told myself it was work. Year 6, I caught him in a lie about where he was from. He'd told me he was from Ohio. Turns out, he was from Nuevo Laredo, right on the Texas-Mexico border. He'd crossed illegally at 17. Everything he'd told me about his childhood, the Little League games, the suburban house, the normal American upbringing was fabricated. When I confronted him, he broke down crying, said he was ashamed, said he lied because he thought I'd look down on him, said he was terrified I'd leave him if I knew the truth. And idiot that I was, I comforted him. I held him. I told him his past didn't matter, that I loved him for who he was now, that we'd build a real life together, no lies, no secrets. The lies didn't stop. They just got better. Year 7, he started working late 3-4 nights a week. Year 8, he bought a second phone. For work. Year 9, he stopped sleeping in our bed. I snore. I don't want to keep you up. By year 10, we were roommates who occasionally shared a meal. But I made myself believe that this was just a rough patch, that all marriages go through this, that if I just held on, if I just loved him harder, he'd come back to me. The morning ice came, I was in the kitchen. David had left 2 days prior for another Austin trip. His coffee was still in the cabinet. His running shoes were by the door. Our wedding photo was on the fridge, me in a white dress that cost too much, him in a rental tux, both of us smiling like we had forever. The knock was loud. Official. 3 sharp raps. I opened the door in my robe, hair still wet from the shower. 2 agents. Badges. And a folder. Mrs. Nguyen, I'm Agent Morales. This is Agent Chen. May we come in? I let them in because I'm a lawyer. I know you don't slam the door on federal agents unless you want a warrant in 20 minutes. I offered them coffee. They declined. We sat in my living room, the living room I decorated with furniture from Room and Board and Vietnamese silk paintings my mother left me, and Agent Morales opened that folder. Mrs. When we have reason to believe your husband, David Reyes, is involved in a marriage fraud scheme. We believe he entered into a fraudulent marriage with you to obtain legal permanent residence. We also believe he is currently maintaining a second marital relationship with a Miss Carla Mendez in Houston, Texas, with whom he has 3 children ages 7, 5, and 2. I didn't cry. Not then. I think my brain short-circuited. I just sat there staring at the photos Agent Morales slid across my coffee table. David, a woman I didn't recognize, 3 kids, a house with a porch swing, a dog, a minivan. A life that looked more real than anything we'd ever had. How long? I asked. Agent Chen answered. The children suggest the relationship began approximately 8 years ago. So, concurrent with your marriage, Mrs. Nguyen. 8 years. He'd been married to her for 8 of our 10 years. While I was miscarrying our baby, he was celebrating her first pregnancy. While I was burying my mother, he was at her baby shower. While I was paying our mortgage and filing his tax returns and fighting to keep him in this country, he was building a family with someone else. But here's where it gets worse. You ready? Because this is the part that made me want to burn the house down. Agent Morales leaned forward and said, Mrs. Nguyen, we don't believe you're a victim here. We believe you're a co-conspirator. I laughed. I actually laughed. It was that or scream. Excuse me? We have wire transfers from your joint account to an account in Houston. Monthly payments, $2,400. For 8 years, totaling over $230,000. We believe you were paying Miss Mendez to maintain the facade of her relationship with your husband while you maintain the legal marriage for his immigration status. I stood up. My knees were shaking, but I stood up. Those transfers, I said, my voice barely controlled, were his family support. He told me his mother was sick in Texas. He told me his brother needed help with rent. He told me I stopped. Because I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. And why would they? I was an immigration attorney. I knew exactly how marriage fraud worked, and I'd been playing the role of clueless wife for a decade. Mrs. Nguyen, Agent Morales said, softer now. We're not here to arrest you. We're here because David Reyes has been indicted, and because we need your testimony. Or, we need to know if you're going to lawyer up. I looked at that wedding photo on the fridge. 10 years. 10 years of my life. 10 years of my 30s, the decade where you're supposed to build something real. Gone. Not just gone. Stolen. And not just by him. By my own willful blindness. I need to make some calls, I said, but first I need to see everything you have. They gave me the file. I read it cover to cover. And that's when I found the first plot twist. David wasn't just a guy who married me for a green card and fell in love with someone else on the side. He was a product. Carla Mendez, the woman in Houston, she wasn't his soulmate. She was his handler. The file showed it clear as day. Carla Mendez ran a marriage brokerage out of Houston. She recruited undocumented men, mostly from Mexico, and Central America matched them with U.S. citizens or legal residents and managed the relationships. She taught them what to say in interviews. She provided fake lease agreements, fake utility bills, fake joint bank accounts. She even had a photographer who staged couple photos for immigration files. David was one of her first clients in San Francisco. I wasn't his target because he loved me. I was his target because I was perfect. Immigration attorney. Vietnamese Americans statistically less likely to be suspected of marriage fraud than other demographics. Stable income. No family nearby to ask questions. A bleeding heart who thought she was saving the world one visa at a time. And the $2,400 monthly transfers? That wasn't family support. That was Carla's cut. David had been siphoning money from our joint account, my money to pay the woman who orchestrated my destruction. For 8 years, $230,000. While I shopped at Target to save money. While I skipped vacations. While I told myself we were building a future. But the second plot twist? That's the one that broke me. And then rebuilt me. In the file, there was a transcript. A wiretap. David talking to Carla 6 months ago. Carla. She's getting suspicious, David. The lawyer thing. She's too smart. David. She's not smart. She's useful. She thinks she's saving me. She'll never look too close. She's too busy being the hero. Carla. What about the kid? David. What kid? Carla. The one she lost. You know she thinks it was her fault. David. Yeah, that was convenient. Saved me from having to fake being a dad. I had to stop reading. I had to put the file down and walk to the bathroom and throw up until there was nothing left. When I came back, Agent Morales was still there. He hadn't moved. He just looked at me with these eyes, not pity. Exactly. Recognition. Like he'd seen this before. Mrs. Nguyen, he said, I need to know. Are you going to help us? Or are you going to protect him? I didn't answer right away. I went to my office. I unlocked my safe, and I pulled out a folder I'd started 6 months ago. A folder I hadn't told anyone about. Not my therapist. Not my best friend. Not even myself, really. See, 6 months ago, I found a receipt. A hotel in Houston. The Driscoll. Valentine's Day. 2 nights. Charged to a credit card I didn't know he had. I told myself it was a mistake. A client charges. Something. But that night I couldn't sleep. So I started looking. I hired a private investigator, offshore account, fake name, the whole thing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was traumatized from my mother's death and the miscarriage and the isolation of the pandemic, that David could never do this to me. The PI sent me photos, videos, bank records. I had it all. I just didn't have the courage to look at it. So I put it in my safe and told myself I'd deal with it when I was ready. I was never going to be ready. I was going to be one of those women who dies at 80, still married to a ghost, still making his coffee, still waiting for him to come home from Austin. But ICE showing up, that forced my hand. And here's what I realized in that moment. Sitting across from two federal agents with a folder full of my husband's crimes and another folder full of my own detective work, I wasn't just a victim, I was a weapon he'd been using against the system I swore to protect. And it was time to turn that weapon around. I'll help you, I told Agent Morales, but I have conditions, and I have evidence you don't know about. I slid my folder across the table. The PI's report, the wire transfers, the hotel receipts. The photos of David and Carla at a birthday party for their 5-year-old, a birthday that happened on our anniversary, while David told me he was stuck in traffic coming home from a job site. Agent Chen's eyebrows went up. Mrs. Nguyen, if you had all this, why didn't you come to us? Because I was still hoping I was wrong. Because I thought if I loved him enough, the truth would change. Because I stopped. Took a breath. Because I didn't want to be the woman who got played. I wanted to be the woman who saved him. And admitting he never needed saving meant admitting I was never the hero. I was just the mark. But that was then. And this? This was war. Over the next 3 weeks, I became the government star witness. I handed over every email, every text, every financial record. I wore a wire, a lawyer, wearing a wire, and had dinner with David when he came back from Austin. I asked him about his mother, about his brother, about the family support payments, and he lied beautifully, effortlessly. The same way he'd been lying for 10 years. Babe, you know my family's complicated. You know I can't talk about it. David, I've sent over $200,000 to Texas. I think I deserve to know where it went. It went to my family, Lynn. Why are you doing this? Why are you interrogating me? I thought you loved me. I did. That's why this hurts so much. He didn't suspect a thing. Why would he? I'd spent a decade proving I was trustworthy, proving I'd never question him, proving that my love was unconditional, which, in his mind, meant my stupidity was unlimited. But here's the thing about being an immigration attorney who specializes in fraud cases. I know exactly what evidence holds up in court. I know exactly what makes a jury angry. And I know exactly how to build a case that doesn't just win, it destroys. I helped the prosecution map out the entire Mendez network, 12 fraudulent marriages across 4 states, over $3 million in laundered money, 3 other wives who thought they were in love. 2 of them had kids with their fake husbands, kids who were U.S. citizens by birth, now caught in legal limbo because their fathers were going to prison and their mothers were facing deportation for conspiracy. I looked at those case files and I saw myself. I saw what I could have been, what I almost was. The trial started 6 months later. I took the stand on day 3. The defense attorney, a shark in a cheap suit, tried to paint me as a scorned woman, a control freak who couldn't handle her husband having a life outside their marriage. He asked me, in front of the jury, Mrs. Nguyen, isn't it true that you were aware of Mr. Reyes's activities and chose to participate because you were desperate to maintain the illusion of a happy marriage? I looked at him. Then I looked at David, sitting at the defense table in a suit I'd bought him, and I smiled. No, I said. It's true that I was desperate, but I wasn't desperate to maintain an illusion. I was desperate to believe that the man I loved wasn't a fraud, that our marriage wasn't a transaction, that the baby I lost wasn't just an inconvenience to his schedule. I paused. But he was. It was. And it was. The jury was out for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Marriage fraud, wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy. David got 8 years, Carla got 12. 3 of their clients got deported. The network collapsed. And me, I walked out of that courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon. The fog was rolling in off the bay, the way it always does in San Francisco. I went home to my empty house. I'd kept it in the divorce, not because I wanted it, but because I could afford it and he couldn't. And I stood in the kitchen where I'd made his coffee for 10 years. I threw out the coffee maker. I threw out the oat milk. I threw out the sugar. And then I sat on the floor and I cried. Not for him, not for marriage, for me. For the 32-year-old girl who thought love was a visa application you could approve with enough effort. For the 35-year-old woman who blamed herself for a miscarriage while her husband was celebrating someone else's pregnancy. For the 42-year-old attorney who wore a wire to dinner because it was the only way she could finally hear the truth. But I also cried because I was proud, because I didn't let him destroy me. Because I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and I turned it into justice, not just for me, but for 11 other women who didn't have my resources, my education, or my stubborn refusal to stay broken. So, here we are. You know the whole story now. The meet cute that was calculated. The marriage was a business plan. The decade I spent as a supporting character in my own life. And the ending where I didn't just survive, I struck back. But I need to circle back to the question I asked you at the beginning. Because it's been sitting in my chest like a stone for 2 years, and I still don't have a clean answer. Am I in the wrong? Am I in the wrong for wearing a wire on my own husband? For handing 10 years of private life to federal prosecutors? For celebrating when he was sentenced? For still feeling, if I'm honest, a dark, hot satisfaction every time I remember the look on his face when the verdict came down? Some people say yes. His family, the real one in Texas, not the fake one he invented, sent me letters. I hate mail. You destroyed him. You could have just divorced him. You didn't have to ruin his life. I read the first 3. Then I stopped. Because their definition of ruined was 8 years in prison. My definition of ruined was 10 years of my life spent loving a hologram. Am I in the wrong for not seeing it sooner? For ignoring the phone face down, the secret passcodes, the business trips that never produced a single business card? For making excuses while he made withdrawals? For choosing to be the hero of his story instead of the protagonist of my own? Maybe. Probably. I was a lawyer who couldn't see the case against her own husband. A fraud specialist who got defrauded. There's a special kind of shame in that, the shame of expertise betrayed by hope. I carry it. I probably always will. But here's what I know for sure. I am not in the wrong for demanding justice. I am not in the wrong for refusing to be collateral damage in someone else's scam. I am not in the wrong for taking a system that tried to make me a co-conspirator and using it to burn the whole operation down. The lesson? Red flags aren't decorations, they're warnings. And if you're so busy trying to be someone's savior that you ignore the fact that they're drowning you on purpose, you're not loving them. You're disappearing for them. I disappeared for 10 years. I'm not disappearing anymore. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever ignored a red flag, ever made yourself small for someone else's convenience, ever wondered if your love was real or just a transaction, hit that like button. Drop a comment. Tell me, what would you have done? Would you have worn the wire? Would you have walked away? Would you have forgiven him? And if you're going through something like this right now, if your gut is screaming and your heart is making excuses, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I am going to tell you this. You are allowed to be the main character. You are allowed to choose yourself. And you are absolutely, unequivocally not in the wrong for wanting a love that doesn't require a background check. Subscribe, turn on notifications. Because next week, I'm telling the story of what happened when Carla Mendez tried to contact me from prison. And trust me, you don't want to miss that. My name is Linh Nguyen. I'm 42 years old. I'm single. I'm a little bit broken, but I'm whole enough to know my own worth. And that took 10 years, one ICE raid, and a whole lot of rage to learn. See you in the comments.